Good evening to all our viewers here on I-24 News. We are here in the south of Israel, in the city of Ashkelon. Of course, we will keep on updating you from the ground. Be with us.
أرحب بكم مشاهدينا. سوف نكون في هذه التغطية الخاصة من مدينة أشكلون. كونوا معنا بعد قليل.
Bonsoir à tous, édition spéciale d'I-24 News ce soir en direct d'Ashkelon avec de nombreux invités. À tout de suite.
Well, welcome to I-24 News. As you've seen, our host down in Ashkelon on the front lines of the situation. But here in the studio, it's a special edition, Day 7 of Israel Defense Force Operation Protective Edge, launched by Israel to put a stop to rocket fire from the Gaza Strip. Well, today, the rockets from the Gaza Strip and the Israeli air raids continued, as they have for the past 7 days. In the late afternoon, attempts were made to target Dimona, where Israel's alleged nuclear reactor is located. But as the violence continues, with 2 sisters, aged 11 and 13, injured by a recent attack in Israel's south, reports are also emerging of serious attempts now by international players to forge a ceasefire between the warring sides. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is reportedly flying to Cairo for talks, and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is off to Ankara, Turkey. With me in the studio now is Reserve Colonel Yossi Daskal, the former head of the Israeli Defense Force anti-terror arena. Thank you for joining us here tonight.
Good evening.
Start by asking you, let's take a general focus on the operation so far, and its 7th day now. What do you think has been achieved by the IDF so far?
According to what the IDF is publishing, that more than 100 active terror men from the Hamas was killed during this bombing and during different attacks that they tried to carry out. And this is one point that it achieves. Second point, I think a lot of infrastructure that was built up in the last 2 years by the Hamas in Gaza Strip was hurted very hard. We see the tunnels, we see the place where they launched the rocket hit them. And another very effective point, I think, that have on the commanders of the Hamas is hitting their private flats and buildings. Part of them are used by them as an active command place or a war room, and part of them are the families that live there. And of course, when they will come out from the hidden places that they are now, they will find that their houses was destroyed. And this is the more, let's say, a conscious fight against Hamas. Hamas is trying to run a conscious fight against us. I think it's one of the points that the IDF and the Israeli government is thinking how to create a situation that Hamas have a red line and know
or try not to stop the rocket fire.
Not stop. In this point, I believe they are ready to stop. But the Israeli government and the IDF try to achieve a longer time of ceasefire between Hamas and to be more sure that it will not come back in 2 years.
Absolutely. We'll come back to you in just a moment here. But with ongoing Gaza rocket fire and Israeli airstrikes, the international community is stepping up its efforts to arrange a ceasefire. Well, Egypt is emerging as the main mediator between Israel and Hamas, and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will arrive in Cairo tomorrow, while German Foreign Minister Walter Frank Steinmeier will hold talks in Jerusalem. Well, I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev explains the diplomatic efforts to end the violence.
7 days and hundreds of rockets into Operation Protective Edge, most Israelis have grown used to the sound of the sirens. Now, the world is getting its share, too.
Now, we just had, this is the siren that goes off on my phone.
Can you hear this through the, can you hear this?
While the IDF continues its intensive airstrikes as well as preparations for a ground offensive, Jerusalem is gearing up on the diplomatic front. Instead of missiles and gunshots, this is the war of words and images.
Between us, we're using missile defense to protect our civilians, and they're using their civilians to protect their missiles.
The Israeli Prime Minister has given no indication of whether the campaign is nearing its end or is on the verge of massive expansion, but the diplomatic clock is definitely ticking. The ongoing rocket barrages from the Gaza Strip is escalating public pressure to stop the fire once and for all. But the Israeli cabinet seems to know that a ground operation will not necessarily serve Israel's interests, and that the growing Palestinian death toll will eventually undermine international support for Israel's right to defend itself. Washington is intensifying its efforts to arrange a ceasefire, with Egypt emerging as the main mediator. And European countries are calling to return to the November 2012 understandings which followed Operation Pillar of Defense. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and German Foreign Minister Walter Frank Steinmeier will arrive in the region to promote the ceasefire initiatives. Meanwhile, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has decided to launch an international campaign against Israel and increase the pressure to stop the operation. He's initiated emergency meetings of UN bodies to debate the crisis, and the Arab League foreign ministers, too, are meeting to raise an alarm on the issue.
We hope that the United Nations will discuss the Palestinian demand to hasten the response and provide safety and protection to the defenseless Palestinian people.
Signals from Gaza indicate that Hamas is seeking to lower the violence, but at the same time is desperate to present some sort of achievement. Israel, however, is seeking a long-term solution rather than just another timeout for Hamas to renew its offensive capabilities. For the time being, the ground offensive is still an option, but based on past experience, a diplomatic solution will eventually be found.
Well, now we're in the studio here again after seeing this report about the potential diplomatic efforts now to bring an end to hostilities here. Let's look at Hamas for a minute now. In your estimation, what may bring them to a situation where they decide, okay, now's time to stop? Some have said that they first want to achieve some sort of victory image here from this campaign. What form do you think that must take, or what has to happen to Hamas first before they'll come to the table?
You know, there is a famous story that once Nixon asked Henry Kissinger how he finished the war in Vietnam. And say, no problem, reduce your forces and declare that you win. This is the same situation. They already declare that they win. They say Tel Aviv is under shelters. They say we bombed Benjamin Netanyahu office. They say we bombed Dimona, etc., etc. And this is a situation for their point of view. They believe that they have a winning, or declare at least by the spokesman that they have a winning. I believe they are ready to cease fire, because if we try to understand why they started this time so let's say not suddenly, but really getting in feeling that they're going on a suicide mission because they don't have support of the Egypt, they don't have support in the Arab world. The Arab world is busy with other issues. And they believe that if they will bring again some destroyed houses in Gaza and again show hidden children and hidden women, they will achieve again the support of the Arab world and the support of the world, and they achieve again especially the finance support. And in this moment, they have the picture from, let's say, the practical issue why they started. If this is the right estimate about why they started, they have it. They now can start again to get money to repair the infrastructure and repair the houses. And to declare that they win, they are doing it already. So they are ready for ceasefire.
So you see that the groundwork laid
the other side is ready
to agree to that. Well, very interesting. Well, now we go to our host, Lucy Al-Rish, who's standing by in the city of Ashkelon in southern Israel. Been one of the epicenters of this conflict, now under much rocket and missile fire there. Lucy, over to you.
Yes, thank you, David. Yes, like you said, we are here in the city of Ashkelon, where we're broadcasting from the south of Israel. And with me here on set is Amit Shemle.
Hello.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
You're, let's say, a young girl from the city of Ashkelon who is experiencing all the last events and been experiencing this for a long, long time. Do you want to share with us how it is to live like that almost every day?
It's quite difficult. It's been almost 8 years now that Ashkelon has been a part of the shooting area. And I think it's mostly hard that the world can see that although there's two parts to every side, but even though we don't have much loss in like people die and stuff like this, but it's only because we learned how to protect ourselves. And it's been to be a teenager in this kind of reality. It's quite difficult because this is our summer break. We worked 10 really tough 10 months, and we waited so long for these 2 months to just it's summer.
How old are you?
I'm 16.
You're 16, so you didn't finish school yet.
No, not yet.
You were supposed to enjoy your vacation.
Yes.
And I believe that, like you said, living under this reality is something maybe impossible. When you're trying to explain this to your friends who are not living this reality, let's say, for example, now it's not like that in Tel Aviv, but if you have friends in Tel Aviv or in the north or in other parts of Israel, how do you explain this to them?
I think even now it's still the same because I was in Tel Aviv last week, and I saw everyone just continue with the regular basis, the routine, even though there was their alarm 3 minutes after everyone continued. And here, all of my friends, we talk and we say we're so frustrated because we want to go out, we want to do stuff, and only today there were 8 alarms, which is, I think it's crazy. You can't live in this kind of reality. And 8 alarms, it's, I think, everything that Tel Aviv got through since Tzuk Eitan started. And I'm not sure how to explain this kind of thing, the sense of fear when you hear it.
How do you calm yourself?
Mostly music, actually.
Music?
Yeah. Just go to my room after the alarm, just put on some music and just relax and try to ignore everything.
You've been living under this situation for how long now?
8 years now.
8 years now. To live under 8 years of missiles, it's not something easy.
No.
Do you sometimes just, and it's very, very difficult to look at somebody else or to try to understand somebody else in these difficult times. But do you sometimes just, when you're listening to music, do you try to think about the other side, about a 16 years old girl who's sitting right now in Gaza and trying to listen to music and to understand this crazy situation?
I do, actually. I think there are just innocent people that got caught between crazy situations that, they're being forced to live in this kind of reality just the way we do, and I feel sorry for them because they don't have to go through all of this. And I know they don't have a choice, but last night there was an interview with Bibi Netanyahu, and I really like something that he said. He said that we use muscles to protect our citizens, and they use their citizens to protect their muscles. And I think it's really true because Hamas is just putting them out they're also victims of this war, just like we do. And I'm sure they're getting the same difficult times as we do.
So when you're hearing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying what he's saying, do you get sometimes frustrated about the current situation, about maybe that the governments along the history just didn't do a lot to take you out, the citizens, from this situation?
Yes, I do. I think that one of the things that annoyed me the most, it's we're getting hit for 8 years, the lot has been hit for 14 years, and it seems like only when Tel Aviv is getting hit, then someone starts to notice, and things are starting to change. And it's quite tough to live in this kind of reality where you say, I'm not worth it, I'm not worth to be fought for the past 8 years. And although there were 2 operations that tried to stop it, after a short time, they just quit and they say, there's nothing we can do. And yes, it's sad.
So if I will take you back 8 years ago, when the first missile hit Ashkelon, you were 8 years old.
Yes.
What do you remember from that day?
Wow, I really remember that day. The rocket fell 100 meters from my house, and there was no alarm at that time. We just sat for breakfast, the entire family. It was at, I think, 7:30 a.m. And the entire house was shaking. The glasses were completely we thought they were going to break. And we didn't know that this could happen to us too. We always heard about Sderot and everything, but when it happens to us, it was so scary. And to hear, the sound of the explosion of the rocket, it was a very scary time. And I remember my sister, she was She was really small. She was like 2 years. And we tried to calm her down because she was really crying and she didn't understand what's happening and where the noise came from. And since then, for 8 years, we live in the same reality.
How did your parents explain to you the situation?
They said that sometimes people don't really like Israel. And there are misunderstanding about who should take control of the country and who should be in here. So people are fighting to try to get the control back to their hands.
You know, today we're experiencing here a lot of in the country a lot of hate between Jews and Arabs and Jews among themselves and Arab among themselves. Where do you stand? You see everything in all the news, and I know that it's maybe a big question for a 16 years old who's trying to understand the world and who maybe doesn't have a political let's say views and understands exactly how the political arena is working. How do you see this whole situation?
I think that mostly we seek for peace. And I hope people don't mind that I speak for the Israelis and the Jews, but none of us wants to see people die, or we don't encourage the war. We just want to live in peace in our country, just the way they do. I'm sure they're coming from the same situation, and you know, it's tough to live in this kind of reality, and especially when, I mean, you could see that when they kidnapped the three kids.
3 boys.
The 3 boys. We didn't start all of this. They did. And I'm not trying to point fingers and say they are the one to blame. So I'm sure they're saying the same things, that we are the one to blame and we started everything. But eventually, we're doing all of this not to start a war, just to get some peace and try to live our life in quiet. And because this is crazy. This is not kind of reality that anyone should live in. I think I'm sure that every other country in the world wouldn't accept this kind of reality. And I hope people could see that where we're coming from and try to support us, Israel, and just take our side sometimes.
So if I can ask you to send a message today to this imaginary or existing, she is existing, this existing 16 years old girl in Gaza who's listening to music, what would you tell her?
That I hope she stays strong, and that I wish she will stay safe. And maybe someday we could all just live in peace together and not be in a constant war.
Amit, you are a very brave girl.
Thank you.
I have to say. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Lucy.
David, we're getting this back to you. Like you said, we cannot imagine. We basically can just see the reality. 16 years old girl here in Ashkelon, and a 16-year-old probably girl who's sitting right now in the Gaza Strip and thinking about her future, thinking about her life. Both of them are looking for maybe a different reality than the reality that we're living in the last few days. David, to you.
Well, thank you for that, Lucia Arish. There's certainly another reality to be felt from citizens in these southern communities now. As we just seen, this young girl expresses some very interesting and personal points about living under these kind of conditions. One of the things that jumped out to me is that she expressed frustration with the Israeli government's repeated, as she termed it, lack of complete effort to annihilate this threat, that there's been multiple operations, but none of them have really succeeded in ending this threat to citizens of Israel. Hamas is largely rooted in an ideology that's found across the Muslim world. Jihad, do you believe that Israel can defeat this ideology militarily, or what's the tactic here to put an end to the situation?
It's very hard to defeat ideology, and if you're looking on the history of fighting terror groups around the world in the last 100 years, there is not a military victory of a terror group. it's always in the end with a compromise, a political compromise, that the terror group disappear or get in a government or other things. Unfortunately, when you're taking the Quran or you're taking even the Arabic language, you don't have a word in Arabic, Lucy can ensure it, you don't have a word in Arabic that is equivalent to compromise. There is not a word of compromise. So to find a compromise in this moment with Hamas, it's mission impossible. You cannot do it ideologically. You cannot do it because they don't believe in a compromise. They can call it what they call in Arabic tahadiyah. It's mean stopping fighting for different interests, and we will continue later after we will be ready again. And I believe what we try to do in this operation is this try again to make him very hard to take the decision to try again. This is the only aim that we can put on it. One of the things is hitting very hard the infrastructure and bring them to a situation that they cannot militarily, in this way of threatening missile of civilians, they cannot do it so easily as they had done it 7 days ago.
By a temporary ceasefire, temporary quiet to debilitate their tactical abilities, of course, but that doesn't solve the conflict and speaks to the frustrations of this young girl. I think she's directing her frustrations towards the government, but it's a larger issue than that, perhaps.
If we take the last 10 years or 8 years, it's happened the third time, and this is a frustration. And it was some agreements that the Egyptians succeed in 2012 to arrive to some agreement.
We'll see what kind of compromises can be worked out now, or at least mediated here. We'll come back to you in just a moment here. Now we go to our correspondent, Shai Ben-Ari, who's standing by in the south here near the border with the Gaza Strip. Now, Shai, there's been a lot of noise down there this evening. How are you doing, and what's the latest?
Right, David. Well, just a few minutes ago, actually, we were here in Kfar Aza, which is very close to the Israel-Gaza border. And just a few minutes ago, we captured images to the north of here. We're talking about lights that appeared in the sky and were sort of gently falling to the ground. As best as we could tell, we're talking about military flares, lighting flares, that are usually used by the Israeli military, technological means used to get a sort of visual of something happening on the ground. Now, I don't want to speculate too much exactly on what this may be, what may be happening on the ground, but this, of course, could be perhaps maybe an infiltration from the Gaza side, perhaps even something of an incursion on some level from the Israeli side. It could be a two-sided thing. So I don't want to speculate too much, but that was happening to the north of us in the general direction of Ashkelon, though I'm not sure exactly how near. In any case, it has been very noisy around this area, not just what things that have been falling in the sky, let's say, but also things that have been landing on the ground, many mortar shells being fired to this area. And we've been hearing, we also heard a senior military official being quoted that perhaps Hamas was interested in bringing this whole story to an end. When we talk about the end game here in the Middle East, that does not necessarily mean that things are quieting down. Oftentimes, in these kinds of conflicts, towards the end, we actually see an effort to bring it to an even more intensive level. People actually raise their fire and press on the gas, you could say, on both sides. That often happens. It happened in the 2006 Lebanon War and in the previous conflicts with Gaza. So now, if we're indeed nearing the end here, people here fear that we may be seeing an intensification of the fire towards Israeli towns and perhaps also an intensification of the Israeli bombardment in the Gaza Strip.
Well, thank you for that report. Our correspondent Shai Ben-Ari is standing by on the Gaza border. Well, now we go to another one of our correspondents in the field, Eli Ochenberg, who's standing by in the city of ASHDOD, another city that's seen some heavy rocket and missile fire here in the last week. Eli, what's the report from there today?
Well, David, earlier today we've been in Ashkelon, which is one of the cities that was hit by a lot of rockets during the last 7 days. And beaches, the streets, the hotels were completely empty. But here in Ashdod, which is a city a bit up north than Ashkelon, the life here looks very normal. You have people hanging out in shopping malls, dining in coffee shops and restaurants, and really trying to keep life as normal as possible. And it's really interesting to see how different residents are dealing with this situation in different ways. You know, there's no one way to deal with this crazy reality, and some of them are choosing to stay at home, be dedicated to the reports and the updates about what's going on, and others prefer to keep on going, try to pursue life as normal as possible, and we will of course keep you updated. But as for now, here in Ashdod, life is normal.
Well, certainly. Thank you for that report, Eli Ochenberg there. Some of the images we've seen there speak to not always normal down there. Some of the destruction taking place in the streets, and some of the other day, actually, a gas station being hit directly by a missile there. So now another aspect about this situation here now, as our correspondent Shai Ben-Ari just mentioned, down on the Gaza border, he's seeing flares in the area of the northern Gaza Strip, and he brings up the idea again of a possible ground incursion. At this point, there was a lot of talk about that in the previous days, somewhat less now today. What do you think the effectiveness of an increased ground operation can be, or do you think that's recommended in this situation?
Again, according to the experience in the world of dealing with infrastructure of terror groups or military or other things, it's very hard to destroy totally the infrastructure only with air attacks. And in the end, people have to arrive to check, to see if every infrastructure is really out of order, or we should do other steps to do it. And of course, force grounded, if they're coming in, they can do it, ensure that infrastructure, they can let's say, rule or be up or observe better the places where, if they come closer, to observe better the places where the rockets are launched to direction of Israel, and it can create that again this hurting the infrastructure of the terror, of the military possibilities. Let's call it
thank you for
in this
your
way.
Contribution here, Reserve Colonel Yossi Daskal. Thank you again for joining us on our special edition, and to our viewers, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back to our special edition coverage here of IDF Operation Protective Edge, now in its 7th day, aimed at stopping the rocket fire out of the Gaza Strip. Well, joining me now in the studio is Yoav Limor, military analyst for the Israel Hayom Daily. Thank you for joining us again.
Good evening, David.
Let's focus on the military achievements right now somewhat. There's been less talk in the last day about a ground operation. Do you believe all options are still on the table here for Israel?
In general, yes. And if you would listen to Israeli leaders, that's what they will say. If you ask me, the chances are getting smaller and smaller by the minute. You'll ask me why, and I'll say that within hours, Secretary of State Kerry will land in Cairo, talking of ceasefire. Afterwards, he'll come to Israel to talk about the terms that come from Hamas. He might go back and forth to Cairo and back to Jerusalem, but once Kerry is in the region, Israel won't get into Gaza, boots on the ground, risk everything, risk confrontation with the U.S. So if there was a window of opportunities, it seems that we are getting to a point that it's about to close. There is only one thing that might change what I've just said. If, and I hope it won't happen, Israel does a huge mistake, or if Hamas achieves a huge achievement, hitting, killing lots of Israelis. Obviously, we hope that won't happen, those two sides, but otherwise it seems that the ground operation is getting further and further out of the possibilities.
Can we expect any period of calm, perhaps, surrounding John Kerry's visit to the region? Do you think Hamas will respect his presence?
Hamas will try until the last second, and when I said the last second, I mean the last second, to shoot at Israel, to show that it was Hamas was the last one to shoot, yet had the power, etc., etc. That's how it worked all the times with terror organization. We've seen that phenomena with Hezbollah in Lebanon, with Hamas in Gaza, etc., etc. So I say, David, that both sides will keep on fighting as long as John Kerry is in the region, but both will try to limit their losses, especially Israel, to limit the possibility of making a huge mistake because it will backlash at Jerusalem. So what we're going to see is a very careful Israel within the next 2 days. Hamas, which is trying to achieve achievements to have the picture of victory, as they call it, and one John Kerry who will try to broker a ceasefire between the two sides.
We'll come back to you in just a moment, but now in a day without rocket fire on the Kfar village that's located near the Gazan border, it could be heaven on earth there. Now, well, I-24 News correspondent Shai Ben-Ari was there today.
Appearances can be deceiving. At first glance, this quiet kibbutz in southern Israel seems peaceful enough, but a short walk to the perimeter fence of Kfar Aza reveals a rather more complex reality. From here, only 3 kilometers away, the houses of Jabalia refugee camp inside the Gaza Strip are clearly visible. Despite the proximity, it is difficult to overstate the gulf that divides these two separate worlds.
This place is really heaven on earth, very quiet on when we don't have any sirens or rockets going off. We just heard the launching of a rocket. When we are under attack, this place also turns into a kind of hell on earth, because of the fear and the lack of sleep and the worry.
Kfar Aza, which literally means Gaza village in Hebrew, was established in 1951 by Jewish immigrants from Egypt and Morocco. Around 650 people live here today. They have never been far from this conflict. Still, some here remember simpler days and better relations with the neighbors.
Between the years 1993 and 2000, we had very good relations with our Gaza neighbors. I remember every day I used to drive to Gaza to bring building material.
The residents here have seen all of the conflicts between Israel and Hamas unfold before their very eyes, including the current one, with rocket fire and airstrikes lighting up the sky on a nightly basis. The dissonance can be surreal, but the locals are hoping for a return to normalcy, and soon. Shai Ben-Ari, I-24 News, Kfar Aza.
And we're also joined in the studio by Dr. Michael Widlonsky, an expert on Arab politics and communications. Well, thank you for joining us as well.
Pleasure.
A question for you now. We've debated this a lot in the last week now, trying to analyze the mindset of Hamas leaders and where they see themselves in this conflict. After 7 days of intensive conflict now, there's been a lot of speculation about what it may take to bring Hamas to the situation where they're willing to negotiate and willing to agree to a ceasefire. Do you believe that we've come close to that situation already, that perhaps Hamas already does have something to point to and say this has been a victory for us?
I don't think Hamas has anything yet in hand. And I think that terror organizations function not just by ideology, but also by organizational constructs and personal constructs. That is to say, if there's a personal rivalry within the organization, if there's a competition between another organization, they will operate. We've seen this with Hamas itself and with Hezbollah. The kidnapping of Shalit and the kidnapping of the 2 other soldiers showed a kind of competition. We've seen it before. We've seen it in Fatah. So I think that they want to show the people who handled this, and it was probably Mohammed Def of the military structure of Hamas, doing a little bit on his own, probably wants to show something. Up till now, I would say fairly, he's produced pretty much a disaster for Hamas. And I think he needs something. He may not get it.
You don't think it's a form of victory that they've already been firing missiles regularly over the city of Tel Aviv, over much of central Israel? They've definitely affected the Israeli economy already. They're affecting life in central Israel. They're doing things that no Arab militant organization has done in many, many years, or if ever. This is not enough for them?
Hezbollah did it more and with more damage.
But they didn't reach central Israel. This is
This is the kind of victory that's being claimed, is similar to the victory that Arafat claimed when he was dragged out of Beirut. It wasn't a big victory, and he went from that to being dragged out of northern Lebanon and to being in the shadows for 6 years. I think that there's a tendency on the part of the Arabs in general, we have it among the Jews as well, but I think more so among the Arabs, to try to talk yourself into victory. And I don't think it's going to work, because I think there are more external communications which are discussing what Hamas has actually achieved and what it hasn't achieved. And I think there are a lot of signs in Gaza that people are not very happy.
We'll come back to our guest in just a moment. Now we go to our correspondent Shachar Peled, who's standing by outside the city of Tel Aviv near the Iron Dome anti-missile defense battery. Shachar, it's been a relatively quiet day there today, but what's happened in the recent hours out there?
Well, David, as you said, a very calm day, a relatively calm day here in the outskirts of Tel Aviv. In the past couple of hours, it has been very peaceful, just like the rest of the day. Only in the afternoon, there was the code red alarm siren here in the greater area of Tel Aviv and the cities of central Israel, Givatayim, Petach Tikva, Bnei Brak, Herzliya. We also heard it here. There was no interception from the Iron Dome behind us, but from another one. We know of 4 M75 missiles fired at the center of Israel today and 2 interceptions. We know of some shrapnel landing in the areas of Bnei Brak and Petach Tikva, but with no injuries or much damage to property. I've spoken to a Tel Aviv resident who was on her way on a bus on the highway, the fast highway, when the siren set off. She told me of how frightening it was to stop in the middle of the freeway. All the passengers and driver went on the ground on the road, and the explosion took place right above their head. So everyone's back to be on the edge, but sadly somewhat used to this situation already after hearing what's going on, the heavy fire in the south and in the north. People can relate to what's going on also here in Tel Aviv, but on a much lower scale. We of course will update you if anything will change here on the ground. Back to you, David.
Well, thank you, Shachar Peled, our correspondent standing by near the Iron Dome battery outside of Tel Aviv. We'll come back for more updates from her as they come in. Yo, I have a question for you now about a difference I think we've seen in this campaign versus the last 2 previous campaigns, at least, against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. In the past 2 conflicts, we saw many Hamas leaders being taken out by Israeli airstrikes. We've seen much less of that this time.
Yes, but this goes down to tactics, David. Last 2 operations in 2008 and 2012, Israel started the operation by surprising the other side. And when you had the opportunity to surprise, you could take off whoever you wanted, such as Ahmad Jabri, the chief of staff in the previous operation, whereas this operation started a week after all of Hamas leaders went underground. So in a way, if they don't pop up and don't show themselves, Israel can't do anything. So that's one of the failures that Israel had within that operation. But referring that what we've heard here before, if you want to analyze both sides' achievements and failures, I would look at it in that way. Israel achieved to strike Hamas severely. Hamas lost about 1/3 to 40% of its rocket power, which
to this point in the operation.
To this point of the operation, something like 4,000 out of its 9,000 rockets to all range. Hamas wasn't successful to surprise Israel. Everything that Hamas planned, which means to kill Israelis in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Ashdod, Beersheba, didn't work.
What about the drone today that they got out of
it didn't work. They sent drones. And Israel should shut them down. They tried tunnels, it didn't work. They tried divers, it didn't work. They tried to kill us or to hit Tel Aviv, and it didn't work. But on the other side, Hamas maintained the ability to shoot at Israel every single day, about 200 rockets, to hit or to fire at Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, the Israeli airport, Dimona, the nuclear reactor in Dimona, Haifa, which non-enemy has ever done for so long. So Hamas, as each and every terror organization, at the end of the day will claim a huge victory. Hezbollah did it in 2006. Hamas did it in the last 2 operations. He will do the same now. If you ask me, how would we judge the achievements of the operation. I will tell you that we will know them only when we go to the next operation. The further or the longer the ceasefire will hold, that means that Israel holds a big or strong deterrence vis-a-vis Gaza. The shorter the time will be until the mortar attacks or Qassam rockets will be fired again at Israel, that will mean that they didn't learn the lesson that Israel tried to teach them during this operation.
Dr. Widlansky, we're talking about all the military tactics in play now against Hamas. Do you believe that Hamas can be defeated militarily? Obviously, with broad, sweeping efforts, anyone can be defeated, but this is an organization rooted in ideology and something that's rooted across much of the Muslim world now. The concept of jihad and this ideological struggle in battle, specifically against Israel. Can Israel ultimately defeat Hamas with military strength?
The question was asked previously, going back a decade, when Israel first started to use targeted killings. And many people said they'd never work. And in fact, they worked beautifully. Again, it's how you measure defeat and how you measure victory. As Yoav has said, if it works for 3 weeks, that's not a victory for Israel. If it works for 3 years, that's pretty good. When you're dealing with an organization that has a public death wish, like Hamas, which says we want to die, it's a little bit like a policeman trying to deal with a drug addict. You can punch him in the head and he won't feel it. You can even punch him all over the body and he won't feel it. You know that you've had an effect if you kick out his knee and he can't stand. And therefore you have to look at the efficiency quotient. What works to stop them? If you stop Hamas's ability to transfer heavy weapons, to build heavy weapons, and it goes dry, if it has difficulty, this would be an even greater victory, if it has difficulty getting manpower, getting funds, it's an even bigger victory.
Which seems to be their situation already. They're
That's
largely
right.
isolated.
That's right. Now, there are several different ways. Again, I'm going to use a sports analogy. I don't mean to be childish. But you know, you can win a fight with a knockout. And you can sometimes win a fight the way Muhammad Ali beat George Foreman. You can defend and defend until you notice that the other guy doesn't have anything left, and then win. That could be the way we're going now, which is a non-Israeli approach. The usual Israeli strategic approach is offense is the best defense. This is a slightly different approach. And I would say that friends of Israel, if they want to help Israel, should help Israel by giving it enough time to work carefully and clinically and well to defeat Hamas's capabilities. That's what Israel needs. To get out on the street and say, kill them all, or do it. That's all very fine and well, but the final thing I think, again, is what you have said is very correct. It's measured by time and motivation.
So I'll say a couple of things in respect to that. A, the time is nearly over. As I said in the beginning, we are in a stoppage time. The Americans are on their way over, and I believe that a ceasefire will be in the cards within 48 to 72 hours. That's my belief, that's my assessment of the situation. B, whoever thinks that Israel thought or wanted to take over Hamas, to get into the Gaza Strip and take over, it wasn't in the cards. It wasn't in the talking. It wasn't in the decision making. Decision makers that I've been talking to said we are afraid that if we kick Hamas, we will get Somalia in the Gaza Strip. We don't want to get a total chaos that will drag us in for years to come, be responsible for nearly 2 million Palestinians. So at the end, Israel wants something which is nearly impossible to achieve. Listen how complicated it is. We want a weakened Hamas that won't attack Israel, but strong enough that we will be able to control the Gaza Strip and control the smaller organizations from shooting at Israel, separated from the West Bank, but with the PLO living or being over there, especially on the border with Egypt, Egypt preventing them from getting weapons, We want all of that at the same time. It is nearly impossible to achieve, and that's what Israel wants.
A complex set of criteria there, and requiring the cooperation of a lot of players that aren't cooperating right now.
So I'll say one thing.
It's from the world of antibiotics. You inject weakened polio virus back into the...
So what Israel, in one sentence, what the players want, Israel wants to go back to the agreement that both sides agreed on during the last operation a year and a half ago. Hamas wants that, but it wants a couple of things as well: salaries from the PLO, from Abu Mazen, and Egypt to open the Rafah crossing point between Egypt, Sinai and Gaza. The Egyptians, Israel won't be against it. The Egyptians demand that PLO people will be supervising that crossing. Israel will agree to that. Hamas, in my eyes, will agree to that as well, because that's the only way it will get everything that it wants. But Hamas wants one thing more. Hamas wants the Qataris to get in between Hamas and Israel and take the place of Egypt. Israel won't let it happen. That's why the Americans are coming over to trying to take all these ingredients and to bake a cake out of them.
Complex arena that you're painting for us here, but certainly it seems like a situational report there. We'll come back to our...
I think the timetable might take longer than that, because I don't think the Americans are very effective.
We'll find out, won't we, very, very soon now with John Kerry on the way. But first, let's take a look at another aspect of what's taking place around the country. Michal Livon, our correspondent, is in Tel Aviv right now at French Bastille Day celebrations in the heart of the city. Michal, what's going on there despite the atmosphere of war that's been overshadowing the city in recent days and the entire last week and even earlier this afternoon? It looks like people aren't too worried about it.
Hi, David. There's a lot of noise here, so I'm just going to give you a picture of what is happening here behind me. As you said, the Bastille celebration is taking place. We're here on the balcony overlooking Rothschild, where I have to say, whether you can see or not, there are about 1,000 people here taking place in the celebrations, which are organized by the French Institute together with the French Embassy in Israel. Now, as you know, this is coming at a very tense time, and there were important security guidelines that were told to the audience just as the event began. In case of an alarm, I believe there will be chaos here, but there is an underground parking lot right below us, which people were asked to proceed to. I have to say, it's quite a surreal sight to see in these empty streets of Tel Aviv, a full-scale celebration, thousands of people. The police, the Israeli police orchestra played earlier. There's a DJ now playing in the background. The French ambassador spoke. The embassy decided to conduct and go ahead with this event despite the situation, despite threats they received on their Facebook page from Muslim communities in France. For them, it is important to paint a picture and show that life in Israel is moving on despite the operation, despite the rockets. However, even for the Tel Aviv nightlife, which in the past 2 weeks has been completely calm and silent, this is a bit of a strange and unique scene, let me say.
Well, happy Bastille Day to the French here. I'll thank you, Michal Livon, for that report. Now, I know that in communities within 40 kilometers of the Gaza Strip, gatherings like that are not allowed right now, over 300 people. So certainly perhaps risky for many people to gather like that. I see you brought your book with you, Dr. Widlansky, The Battle for Our Minds. And
Free plug, am I allowed to show
absolutely,
it? Okay.
And that brings me to another aspect of what we've seen here in recent days here. Some of the psychological tactics taking place or in use by both sides, by Hamas, as recently as, I would argue, Friday night, when they announced openly that they will shoot at a certain time. It was 9 p.m. They'll fire at Tel Aviv. They showed their ability to do that even after announcing that they would do that. There have been many reports of them mass text messaging the Israeli public right now as a form of psychological warfare here. The Israelis have been also sending mass messages down to the Gaza Strip. I myself have gotten 5 different text messages over 4 days. In Hebrew, in English. What do you make of this, though?
But it was very. I never. No.
They don't know very good Hebrew.
They don't know very good.
Many mistakes.
They make many mistakes in Hebrew.
But this is a new tactic. We haven't seen much of this in the past.
But it's very interesting because it's similar to Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a very, very intelligent and learning terror organization, and Hamas wasn't at the beginning, and they've picked up several things. The fundamental thing is that terror is a phenomenon of the mind. It's a phenomenon of psychology. You don't win by killing more people. You win by scaring more people. And the fact that they're thinking in this direction shows that they're thinking energetically and fundamentally. They're not yet that good at it. Hezbollah was better at it. Hezbollah superseded Arafat and even Mahmoud Abbas in the use of Israeli speakers as surrogates on their radio, on their TV, and people in Israel came to believe them.
Yes, but I'll stop you on that and say Hezbollah succeeded on that only because of one thing. Their leader, Hassan Nasrallah, for a period of time before the Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon in 2000 and until the 2006 Second Lebanon War, Nasrallah was seen among the Israeli people as very credible, much more than our politicians. When he said something, he meant it. He lost it many years ago.
That's right.
Hamas doesn't seem the same way. So winning the credit within the Israeli public will be much harder for him.
But you know, and you've seen this among your colleagues, that people on the air have said that Hamas has said this and they've kept their word.
Yes, but you know,
and that's part of the battle for winning
Michael,
credibility.
At the end of the day, listen, all those launching places that you launch to Tel Aviv or Haifa, you get it from a tunnel. What they've studied from the previous operation, they don't send people underground because Israel closed the circle and killed them directly after they fire. So they've dug tunnels and they come from underground and they put the rocket into the launcher, put a timer, set it to 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, go away. And when the timer reaches the certain time that it launches the rocket. It's very easy to say we'll hit Tel Aviv at 9 o'clock because you only have to set a timer at the right time. I mean, that's not a huge strategy, and that's, in my eyes, it doesn't give them huge credit.
I'm not saying
rattles the populace. It rattles the Israeli population.
They're not at a level yet of Hezbollah, and God willing, they won't get to that level. And Hezbollah, as you say, has already fallen from that level. But I say it's very interesting that they're thinking in that direction, which shows a sophistication which, for example, the PLO has lost a long time ago.
But in my eyes, Michael, what brought them to that was not studying from previous cases, but that. I mean, the new media,
the advancement of technology,
the social media, the ability of everyone to send you or I billions of text messages or emails at a button. It's much easier to everyone. So they have the ability as well. They have youngsters that play with computers as easy as us.
Is this a security breach that they've been able to reach Israeli cell phones at some level? So it's not a breach of telecommunications network?
They don't know that they didn't know that this is Yoav Limor's phone. They've sent everyone.
Well, they hacked Haaretz. They hacked Haaretz.
Okay, but they've sent hundreds of thousands of and you know, they've sent to each and every phone number, telephone in Israel. They don't necessarily know that that's the phone number of Benjamin Netanyahu. He might have received it as well. So what? It's as easy. I mean, Israel can do it, push a button and send billions of text messages. What does it say? Nothing.
Does it enter the minds, do you think, of Israelis? Especially here, we talk about them, Hamas not achieving the tactical victories they would have hoped with casualties on the ground. Is there a tangible fear factor involved, though, with still sending Tel Avivians to their bomb shelters, firing over the central part of the country?
Remember, this is the third time that Israel has been under significant rocket attack going back to the Gulf War. Saddam Hussein, Hezbollah, Hamas.
Which is not too many in the minds of people in Tel Aviv. They all stand out. These are significant incidents.
They are, but it's interesting to watch the reaction of the crowd. I'm looking, for example, at my mother-in-law, who's 85 years old, is a Nazi camp survivor, and her husband, who's 91 years old. They live in a tiny little home in Gadara. They could be scared out of their minds. They're not so scared this time.
They survived the Holocaust. It will take more than that to scare them.
No. On the contrary. When you see the specter, there are a lot of people who say, we have Iron Dome is working not badly. We think we're getting pretty good information. The army, the government seem to know what they're doing. There isn't the bad feeling that we had during the Lebanon War when things were kind of clumsy. And I think that has an effect. If, God forbid, something terrible goes wrong, that would change. And also, if something terrible goes wrong for Hamas, that could be their victory.
Yes, but I'll add to that one more thing. I mean, we tend to dramatize situations, especially us in the media. We talk for hours and we analyze situations and we blow up things. And this is not a war. It's a minor operation. I know what Hezbollah in Lebanon holds in its arsenal. Over 100,000 rockets, some of them with the ability to reach 500 and 600 kilometers, thousands of them with the ability to reach Tel Aviv with warheads of over half a ton. What we see from Gaza is something between 30 to 40 kilograms. It's 15 times more. If it hits Tel Aviv, we wouldn't sit in a studio like that. We would have broadcasted from shelters.
Sample for what could be.
Yes, but on the other hand, we, as I said, we dramatize situations. This is not a war, and the fact, as Michael mentioned,
thank you very much.
Iron Dome gives us the ability to
Dr. Michael
breathe.
Widlansky and Yoav Limon, thank you both for contributing to our special edition
you.
here. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back to I-24 News. You're watching our special edition coverage, Day 7 of the Israeli Defense Force Operation Protective Edge, aimed at stopping rocket fire from the Gaza Strip. Well, now joining me in the studio is Reserve Lieutenant Colonel Avital Leibovich, the Israel Director of the American Jewish Committee, and Ambassador Yitzhak Levanon, former Israeli Ambassador to the UN, Geneva, and Cairo. Thank you both for joining us here. I'd like to start with you, talking about some of the latest developments now in this campaign. In the 7th day now, Protective Edge. We've seen ongoing airstrikes still, mainly focused now, it would seem, after warning residents to leave the northern Gaza Strip, mainly focusing on that area of the Gaza Strip. But we've seen some new tactics in play now by Hamas. Just this morning, some drone aircraft flown out of the Gaza Strip. How significant is that? Is this signal a new phase in some way?
Well, first of all, northern Gaza, it's the area where 35% of the total firing of rocket have been taken from that place. Bet Lahia, Sajaiya, El Atatra, those areas are the problematic areas in Israel way. Regarding the drone or the UAV, I don't think we need to pay that much attention. We're not talking about high tech here. It is a very small and not sophisticated drone. They have used, or they actually manufactured this in the past. We actually targeted a manufacturing facility 2 years ago in the last operation, and we've seen similar drones that Hezbollah is using. I would not count on that as the strategic surprise.
Do we know if this drone carried weapons? Do we know if it was armed?
I think it's premature. I understand some of the pieces fell in the sea, but this drone has capability of either surveillance or carrying arms.
And it was reported that the Israeli Defense Force knew about the launching of this drone from the minute that it lifted off the ground, essentially, but waited till it was in a safe area in Israeli territory to target it with a missile. So I think reports, yes, corroborate what you're saying. It didn't pose a great threat. Didn't catch us off guard, per se, in Israel.
And it also took a few seconds to intercept it by a Patriot missile, which, by the way, the last time we had to use a Patriot missile was in 1991 during the Gulf War. So it is not the newest weapon we have.
Why was a Patriot used in this circumstance? With so many other missiles, methods of taking things out of the sky here with our Air Force, why a Patriot missile?
As I said, it's not a sophisticated weapon. It's a simple drone, not very big high-tech technology inside here. So the Patriot missile can do its job here.
Well, Ambassador Lebanon, we are now hearing reports.
Can I?
Absolutely, yes, if you have something to add to that.
Look, I think that you have to watch the situation in the eyes of Hamas itself. You know, Hamas spoke a week ago that he will have some surprises for Israel. I think that the drone is one of those surprises. It's not a surprise for us, but this is a kind of surprise that Hamas, exactly like, you know, the naval incursion in Zikit or the underground tunnel. So he is trying to fulfill what he says, that I'm going to surprise Israel. Unfortunately, he did not succeed.
And by the way, this is part of the psychological warfare, because the pressure, the extent of the pressure on Hamas is so great that he's trying to pull off his sleeves all these new surprises.
Yes, this is why Hamas is frustrated.
We'll come back to our guests in just a moment now, but first, tens of thousands of residents in southern Gaza were left without electricity after one of their rockets hit a major power line. Well, this catastrophe added to the list of issues facing people in the Gaza Strip ever since Operation Protective Edge began. Well, I-24 News reporter Uri Shapiro has more.
Shortage of food and running water, intense airstrikes by Israeli aircraft, and dozens of casualties. Today, the residents of Gaza Strip are facing another tragedy after a rocket from the Strip hit a high-voltage power line in Israel last night and consequently cut the electricity supply to approximately 70,000 residents. In the meantime, Gaza refugees who escaped from the north of the enclave find it hard to cope with the new situation. Many complain on poor hygiene and lack of water and medicine in their new refuge in Gaza City School.
We decided to go back home because we're deprived of water, electricity, and blankets here. We're sleeping on the tiles. We're going home because the children don't have water to shower. It stinks here.
However, officials from the United Nations Relief and Works Agency are working hard to find a proper solution for the thousands of newly displaced.
There is a widening operation, and if there are more people who are displaced and who need refuge, we will be opening more space. We have done it in the past, and we could do it again, but again, hoping that it would not come to that.
The Israeli army insists it's doing everything necessary to avoid civilian casualties. Nevertheless, with such a massive air offensive against this highly populated and crowded area, human tragedies are inevitable. Many of the citizens who live in the southern Gaza town of Khan Yunis have already found their way to Egypt or other countries. But this is a privilege that not everyone in Gaza can afford.
Well, Ambassador Lebanon, do you believe that the increased pressure from residents of Gaza on the Hamas administration is having an effect at this point on Hamas's activity?
Not yet, because I think that they are not enough. We hear here and there, you know, that you have some pressure, or some people who are talking openly, but basically we don't have, let's say, we don't have enough fuel to move all this population against Hamas. I think that we are facing at this stage a problem which has nothing to do with the military or the political maneuvers. And this belongs to the, I think, to the level, the psychological level. What I mean by that is that the Hamas, and more specifically the military wing of the Hamas, is living in a kind of delusion. He believes that they are the winners, while on the ground it is not the situation. So this makes the whole issue more complicated. He's putting more pressure on the population, those who would like to speak out. They say no. I mean, he used force and coercion not to let them, you know, speak by themselves, and he is complicating a little bit the situation. Add to this, I have the impression that the political wing has no control over the military wing. This complicates the situation even more.
If they have a perception of victory already, do you believe that they're...
They have. This is not my impression.
The Hamas leadership,
yes.
If you think they have a perception of victory already, do you believe that the conditions are right for a potential ceasefire, that they would be ready to agree to something like that?
No, this is why they raise, you know, the pledges and the demands. They would like, you know, to open widely the doors of the Rafah passage. Egypt is not interested. They would like to...
Is the time running out for Israel to continue this operation? As John Kerry's due to arrive in the region now, working to broker a ceasefire?
No, I don't think so. This is not the first time that Mr. Kerry is in Israel, and I think that he will have more chances to come. I think that it's not mature yet, let's say, the conditions that will bring us all together into an immediate ceasefire. Probably we're on the way to that, but not yet. We're not yet there.
You don't think that Hamas has achieved, at some level, a very symbolic victory by raining missiles over the main cities of central Israel at this point, making the missile sirens go off in all these major cities, the psychological and the economic impact that they're having now on the country as tourism has essentially disappeared in the country. The economic effect is there. You could feel it on the streets of Tel Aviv now. Can Hamas already claim that as a form of victory, do you think?
I think Hamas is desperate, extremely desperate. I think he's missing big time the victory picture. So I disagree with you, Mr. Ambassador, in this sense. He has no casualties on the Israeli side, and he's frustrated. He has prisoners from the West Bank inside the prisons following the last operation in the West Bank, and he's frustrated once again. The economy is very bad. It was bad before. He wasn't able to pay salaries to his own workers. He's not targeting any major facilities in Israel, so they're very much frustrated. This is the reason we see all these surprises. This is the reason Hamas is investing such a great deal of time and efforts and budget in those psychological warfare effects, which conclude SMSs, video clips, and different kinds of interesting gimmicks, I would say.
Well, now we've seen the social protests ramping up in Europe, specifically here in the last day. The international pressure ramping up specifically on Israel now to cease the violent operations now. How much is that weighing into the decision makers right now?
Well, it will have an influence, definitely. I think as much that these demonstrations will grow, I think this is more pressure on the decision makers in Israel, because we take seriously the public opinion, the international opinion. But so far, I think, if you look at the picture, you see that at the level of the leaders in the world, we still have, more or less, a substantial, let's say, support or understanding of what we are doing. Here and there, you see demonstrations. If I will take, for instance, the case of Egypt, you have different voices. You have those voices who are in the street and say, look, we have to put pressure on Israel, and they're asking even Egypt to cut off the diplomatic relations and to kick out the ambassador, etc. But at the same time, in Egypt, the same Egypt, you have it on the TV talks, or you have it in the publications or article published, attacking virulently Hamas and putting the blame on Hamas. So this is not a, let's say, black and white picture. It's a little bit more.
Certainly. Now, we'll come back to our guest in just a moment. Now, we go to our correspondent, Shai Ben-Ari, who's standing by on the border with Gaza down there. Shai, what's the latest in the last hour?
Yes, David, we just want to bring you some the latest images that our cameraman Yoni managed to capture here on the Israel-Gaza border next to Kfar Aza. To the north of here, we again saw some lighting flares being dropped from the sky. Again, these are technological means used by the IDF to illuminate something happening on the ground. Okay, so we're talking about something happening to the north of here, and it's difficult to say exactly what. This could be, again, the IDF looking for someone on the ground, looking for perhaps some kind of infiltration from the Gaza side. It could also be, and I don't want to speculate here too much, it could be some sort of incursion from the Israeli side, not necessarily a major one, perhaps a small force. I don't want to speculate here too much because we're getting into unknown territory, so to speak. So we have seen these lighting flares being dropped from the sky earlier in past weeks. For example, in that incident in Zikim where there was an infiltration from the sea. We're seeing them again here tonight. North of here, north of Kfar Aza, in the direction of Ashkelon. As best as we can tell, this is happening inside Israeli territory, though it's sort of difficult to say exactly where. But to the north of here, closer to Ashkelon, also to the north of the Gaza Strip a bit. That's the best we can say right now.
Well, Shai Ben-Ari, thank you for that report from the border with Gaza. We'll come back to you for more updates later in the broadcast as they emerge. Well, back in the studio now, we're discussing basically how the international scene developing before us day by day now is affecting the decisions made by the Israeli government. It seems the international pressure is almost all focused on the Israeli side of this equation here now. And how significant do you believe that is right now on where this conflict is headed?
I would say I'm concerned as a Jew and as an Israeli. These times actually bring into life the very extreme activists in many European countries. And we witnessed, I would say, horrific scenery yesterday in a synagogue in Paris where 400 French Jews were trapped and actually locked inside because they could not leave the synagogue. By the way, they prayed for the safety of Israel. They could not leave the synagogue because there was an angered mob outside threatening to kill them. So I'm deeply concerned of these recurring phenomena in many European countries. I mean, we saw the Brussels case and others, and this worries me.
It still
deeply.
seems that in this case, in this round of the conflict, you could say that we've seen less international outcry than in previous rounds, I should say, most specifically 2012 and 2008. Much louder international outcry. Is that directly related to the casualty figures in Gaza, or is there something else that's perhaps still lessening the tone coming out of the international protest community?
Well, first of all, it has been only 1.5 years since the last operation. There is not too many news in this operation right now, and the world is basically tired from Palestinians in Gaza versus Israel army. Secondly, I'm sorry to be shallow, but there's the World Cup, and the World Cup got a lot of attention. I see the coverage itself, the international coverage, is not, opening headlines all over the world. So these are the reasons for this. I believe that the world doesn't really care as much. And look, in Syria, over 150,000 casualties, and nobody cares.
Syria, Iraq. We'll come back to our guest in just a moment here. But speaking of the World Cup, football, a famous coach once said, is not a matter of life and death, but it's far more important. Well, this was certainly the case for Or Haner, an Israeli community in the path of Gaza rocket fire, which took time off from the war last night to focus on the World Cup final. I-24 News reporter Uru Shapira joined them.
Or Haner, a small collective community only a few kilometers from Gaza, has suffered from the unstoppable rocket strikes of the last few days. But for its residents, the real battle took place on Sunday night as they gathered to watch and support the Argentinian national team in the World Cup final to the sound of explosions and sirens.
We've lived in this tough reality of missile attacks for over 14 years, on and off. The World Cup, however, is something which happens once in 4 years, so we must find a way to combine the two.
Or Haner is made up primarily of Argentinian Jews who came here to watch this dramatic match against Germany. Politicians and celebrities came from Jerusalem and Tel Aviv to support the team, as well as to support the residents.
Every day we're hearing the bombing and the very emergency situation, and here today it's like very different, very happy, sport, love, and to be together, it is very, very nice time.
Even Finance Minister Yair Lapid found a break in his busy schedule to pop over and watch the game. And unlike the politicians, some guests do not have instant solution to the ongoing Gaza violence.
I'm a great believer in positive thinking, and I'm a very spiritual person. I believe in the power of prayer too, but I'm not a miracle worker, and I will leave that to the politicians to sort out.
The opening minutes of the game were quite promising for Argentina. The die-hard fans were quick to celebrate Gonzalo Higuain's goal, which was ruled offside a few seconds later. After 120 minutes, including extra time, the Argentinian team left the field without the precious cup. Indeed, a devastating defeat for the residents, who expected one-upmanship over their bitter enemy, Baruch Heil, a neighboring community of mainly Brazilian immigrants.
Life goes on, what can I say? Football is a simple game. 22 people chasing a ball, and in the end, Germany wins.
After a long, intense battle, the residents are going to sleep. True, Messi and the Albi Celeste did not deliver, but at least they left the pitch with pride. And on Monday, residents of Or Haner returned to their daily routine and the real challenge, the rocket fire coming from Gaza.
Well, Ambassador Levanona, before we cut to speak about the World Cup, and speaking of the World Cup, Germany now, the champions, the German foreign minister is also getting involved now with some of the mediation efforts. Do you think the Germans could play a significant role, as they did in the Gilad Shalit deal between Hamas and Israel?
Well, I sincerely hardly can see that. Besides this, we heard from the German foreign minister that he is not here in a, let's say, in a mediation mission. But yes, he is coming. I think that he's expressing the wish of the European Union. He would like, to ask Israel to be careful, probably not to start with the incursion into Gaza and the ceasefire that everybody is looking for. But I would like, with your permission, to add, an additional aspect which might influence or impact the public opinion in the United States and Europe. Don't forget that in the United States and in Europe, Hamas is outlawed. He is considered as a terrorist organization. So when you are coming to the official level, they are by this decision they took themselves. Okay, we have some demonstrations. We have people, in France and in Brussels. But when you are looking at the government itself, I think that they are, limited with this decision that Hamas is a terrorist organization, and they don't have to talk with it.
A terrorist organization that, in reality, is administering the life of over 1.5 million people. So certainly a more complex situation than an organization in the hills of some far-off country. Talking about international mediation again, who do you think the most important potential mediator is right now in this arena?
Look, there is no. Look, the best one was Egypt. But what to do? Egypt and Hamas, they are two. They're not even, the two sides of the same coin. There is really a deep animosity, really, but a sincere animosity coming from El-Sisi toward the leaders of Hamas, precisely Mash'al and Haniya, personally. Secondly, Egypt believed that the Hamas hurt the national pride and the national security of Egypt. It is deep. It's not something superficial. Qatar, I think that Qatar is, Qatar would like very much, but nobody would like that Qatar will be involved. Turkey is eager, but not too many would like to see Turkey playing this role. And this is why KERRY is coming, to talk to Sisi, to Abu Mazen, to us, to see how we can create a kind of a front of a coalition, or a kind of a coalition, which can help Abu Mazen probably to push a little bit and to influence Hamas to stop the fire. What I see so far, and so far I'm talking tonight, tomorrow it will be probably something completely different. What I see is that all these people, less than Israel and Hamas, they are looking for one thing, to go back to the understanding of 2012 period, not to add anything. It is unacceptable for Hamas and definitely unacceptable for Israel.
Should we be expecting a new turn? As we mentioned, and we don't know what will happen tomorrow. Every day has brought us some new development now. With some of the mediation efforts ramping up, with John Kerry entering the region, do you think we'll enter a period of a bit of a lull in the situation now, or are there still going to be new developments here taking place?
I don't see any lull. I do see a lot of forces ready on the outskirts of Gaza, ground forces waiting for the Prime Minister to decide. I believe the next 24 hours will be critical hours, and they will have to reach some sort of a decision whether to embrace with a ground operation or not. I think that the IDF wisely operated on different levels in this operation and very surgically pinpointing its rockets to specific places. This is why 170 people, I don't know if the figures are right, but if they are right, it's a relatively low number compared to the 1,500 targets that were actually targeted in the last 7 days. So I say no, I don't think there will be a halt here. And next 24 hours are critical ones.
It's certainly remarkable that many missiles can fly into the Gaza Strip, one of the most densely populated places on Earth, and not kill people. I think it's something like 1 out of 15 airstrikes have actually resulted in a death in the Gaza Strip. It may seem amazing that Israel's finding places where there aren't people to strike in the Gaza Strip, this many targets.
But I want to say something in addition to what you're saying. I think that the IDF has really set a very high bar for all militaries in the world, because I don't know any other military that would actually call up a terrorist on his house phone and ask him to evacuate himself and his family. The amount of efforts the IDF is going through in order to make sure there are no harmed civilians, I think it's really very impressive.
You see, in that case, I am fully agree that there is no comparison in the world with the moral behavior of Tzahal.
But is it being recognized in the international community?
Yes, indeed. I was in Geneva, the United Nations. It is considered, but this has nothing to do with the discourses and the speeches that I heard every day against Israel and against the Israeli army. But definitely, I think that we can feel proud of ourselves about the moral behavior, the high level of moral behavior of the Israeli soldiers. I don't think that, well, I'm not going to make any verbal mistakes, but we have seen conflicts in Iraq, in Afghanistan, elsewhere, and I didn't see really such level of morality.
Nothing close, really, yes, to the unprecedented tactics being employed here, the multi-tiered level warning levels now. We'll come back to our guests in a moment. Here we go now again to our correspondent Eli Ochenberg, who's in the city of Ashdod here south of Tel Aviv, a bit on the coast. Eli, what's the latest from where you are?
Well, David, as the talks about an up-and-coming ceasefire are gaining power, the residents of southern Israel are not very happy with this situation. For them, since this operation had begun and even earlier, they called on the government to bring to a definite end the situation where Hamas is firing rockets from the Gaza Strip towards Israel. And as it seems for now, this operation might be over without a certain end for this situation. And again, they are not satisfied with it. For them, they wanted Israel to pursue a ground operation that will severely damage all Hamas infrastructure and will paralyze all their ability to fire rockets at the southern residents. And you have to understand, David, that these residents are living in a constant threat of rockets, not only at times of war, but in daily routine as well. So for them, this operation needs to bring to a complete end this situation. And as it seems for now, again, this operation might be over without such a solution. So they're not very satisfied. But of course, we still do not know what will be the terms of such an agreement. If so, we will of course keep you updated. But this operation getting over, it's not the best possible situation for the southern residents of Israel.
Well, thank you, Eli Ochenberg, in the city of Ashdod, for that. Ambassador, we're talking about the perception of the citizens within Israel now about what's taking place. That's definitely a factor now in the Gaza Strip as well. What conditions must be met for both sides? It seems this is what they're striving for both sides to be able to tell their people that they won this round. How important is that of a factor here?
Look, David, I think that the majority of the Israelis, I'm not talking about other people, that because we have seen them in demonstrations in Tel Aviv, those who are against this operation, but the majority, I would say even the vast majority of the Israelis, they would like a solution which can put an end for the future, and that the Hamas and the Gaza will not strike against civilians, innocent civilians in Israel. They will go for any solution which can bring them to that objective. I don't see the mechanism yet, but I think that the majority of the Israelis would like to see a kind of a disarmament or demilitarizing, let's say, the arsenal of Hamas in order to reach that objective, that there will be no attacks against the Israelis. Israel is not looking to attack the Palestinians in Gaza or to make another war or another conflict in a year and a half. On the contrary, I think that Israel is looking to have a certain stability and calm in this region. Any solution which can bring that to the Israelis, they will go for.
Any closing thoughts here? We have short time left, but about that, do you believe that Israel can, in short, can Israel present this as a form of victory already to their people?
I don't think that the term victory is correct, because victory has a few aspects to it. One aspect is deterrence, and we'll have to see that in a couple of months. The other one is military successes and achievements, and this is something we can see already. 1/3 of the arsenal of the rockets has been damaged.
Some tactical victory already, and it's not over yet, I guess, is the main factor here. Well, thank you very much, Avital Leibovich and Ambassador Lebanon. Thank you both for being here with us in the studio on this special edition. We'll be right back after a short break.